The alarm bells rang across the colony of 7 at 600 hours. Commander Lisa Hayes was already awake, standing in the command center with her hands on the tactical display. The screens showed 3 massive shapes in orbit above the planet. Each ship was the size of a small city. Each ship bristled with weapons that could level mountains. They had arrived. Lisa had studied the reports about them for years. They were a reptilian species with 4 arms and skin that changed color when they got angry. They conquered through fear and force. Every planet they had ever attacked fell within weeks. There was no negotiation with them. There was only surrender or death. The colony had 40,000 people, families, scientists, engineers, children. They had come to 7 because the planet held secrets about how life worked. The biosphere was unique in all the galaxy, but now that seemed unimportant. Now survival was all that mattered. Lisa activated the broadcast system. Her voice reached every speaker in every building across the colony. All personnel to shelter stations. This is not a drill. Military personnel report to defense positions. All civilians proceed to bunker stations immediately. Children go to level 7. This is not a drill. The people of 7 had trained for this moment, but training felt empty when the enemy was actually here. Parents grabbed their children and ran toward the bunkers. Teachers helped the young ones move faster. Engineers shut down systems that needed to be protected. Scientists saved their research data to backup drives and moved underground. Dr. Price was the chief administrator of the colony. He moved through the command center with purpose, speaking to each department head. His voice was calm, but his hands shook slightly. He was 53 years old and had spent his entire career building this colony. Now he was watching it face destruction. "How many ships?" asked Lisa. 3 dreadnoughts, big ones. Each carries weapons and soldiers. They are in synchronous orbit. They can hit any part of the planet right now, Lisa said. She did not look away from the screens. "We have maybe 2 minutes before they open communications." The screens flickered. A face appeared. The commander was large, even by standards. His skin was a deep orange color that marked him as high rank. When he spoke, his voice came through like grinding stone. "Humans, lower species. I am commander. Your colony is now under control. You will surrender all weapons, all technology, and all resources. You have 48 hours. After 48 hours, we will bombard your colony from orbit. Nothing will survive." The transmission ended. The colony fell silent. Lisa looked back at her. They both knew the truth. The colony had 3 old planetary defense cannons, 40 years old. They had a garrison of 500 militia soldiers, most of them security officers with minimal combat training. Against 3 dreadnoughts with their weapons and ground forces, they had almost nothing. Lisa moved to the communications console. She began entering a code sequence that would send a distress signal across space. The message was simple: 7 under attack, colony in danger, request immediate assistance. "Earth is 12 light-years away," said quietly. "Even if they respond immediately, a ship cannot reach us in time." Lisa's fingers did not stop moving. "Then we buy time. That is what we do." The first attack came 3 hours later. The sky above the colony turned red as energy weapons fired from the ships. The colony's power grid went down. Generators kicked in, but they were old and slow. The colony's communication arrays were destroyed in the first volley. The backup arrays were destroyed in the second. Lisa had already moved to the bunkers. The command center was too exposed. From the bunker, she had contact with all the colony's defense positions. From here, she could coordinate the fight, though she knew they could not win. They could only delay. The 3 planetary defense cannons responded. The anti-aircraft batteries opened fire. The shots were slow and heavy, the technology outdated, but they hit. 1 fighter exploded in the sky, then another. The colony's soldiers cheered, but the sound was thin, desperate. The response was immediate and total. Drone strikes began hitting every military position. The colony's defenses fell back to secondary positions. The soldiers moved faster than they thought they could. Fear and survival instinct were powerful teachers. Moved through the bunker, checking on the civilians. Parents held their children close. Some people prayed. Some people simply stared at nothing. A young woman named Sarah sat with her daughter, who was 5 years old. The girl asked if the soldiers would protect them. Sarah could not lie. She told her daughter that good people would try. Sometimes good people could do impossible things. She did not say that sometimes they failed. She did not say that sometimes good people died trying. By the time darkness came to 7, the colony's outer defenses had been destroyed. The ground forces had landed in the northern sector. They were moving toward the colony's main bunker. In 48 hours, Commander had said, they would destroy everything. But the colony had fewer than 48 hours. At the rate they were advancing, they would break through the bunker's defenses in 2 days, maybe less. Lisa sat in the command bunker and looked at her military unit. Most of them were young. Most of them were afraid. She stood up and spoke to them. We were sent here to protect these people. We do not know if help will come. We do not know if we will survive, but we will stand here and fight. We will do our duty. We will make them pay for every meter they take. The soldiers nodded. They understood. They were the last line of defense between the and 40,000 innocent people. Stood beside Lisa and looked at the tactical display. Red dots showing positions. Blue dots showing human defenders. The red was spreading. The blue was shrinking. But then something changed. A signal appeared on the long-range scanner, not something else. A ship emerged from the wormhole relay point at the edge of the system, moving fast. Then another. Then another. Lisa leaned forward, not believing what she was seeing. That is not possible, she whispered. The signals grew stronger. More ships, a whole fleet, moving toward 7, moving toward them. The colony might survive. The colony might actually have a chance. But knew better. He had seen the calculations. Earth's fleets could not reach them in time. Nothing could reach them this fast. Lisa looked at the signals again. Then she saw the designation on the screen. United Nations Space Command, Human Fleet, UNSC Santiago, UNSC Archer, UNSC Freedom. Humans were coming to fight for them. Humans were coming to save 7. On the bridge of the first arriving ship, General looked at the sensor readings. The colony was still fighting, still alive, still had hope. All ships battle stations, he commanded. They are about to learn what humans can do. General had been waiting for this moment for 6 months. The United Nations Space Command had been tracking movements across the galaxy. The intelligence reports had been clear. They were looking for expansion points. 7 was perfect, isolated, rich in resources, defended by a small colonial militia. What they did not know was that Earth was ready. The human fleet had been positioned at Relay Station 9, only 3 light-years from 7, had pushed for the deployment months ago. The other military leaders thought he was being paranoid. Humans were new to space warfare. They had only been fighting for 2 generations. Most of the galaxy did not even take them seriously. But knew something they did not. He had studied every conflict they ever fought. He had analyzed their tactics, their patterns, their weaknesses. They were powerful, yes, but they fought like an older species that had been winning for too long. They expected opponents to break, to surrender, to accept defeat. Humans did not always do those things. Stood on the bridge of the UNSC Santiago as the fleet moved through the wormhole. The jump was instant. One moment they were at the relay station. The next moment they were 3 light-years closer to 7. The dreadnoughts were visible on the sensors immediately. Was tall, with gray at his temples and lines on his face from years of hard decisions. He was not the most powerful human alive. He was not but he understood people, and he understood how to make people fight better than they thought they could. All ships report status, said calmly. The responses came in. 5 destroyers, all combat-ready, 2 heavy cruisers, weapons hot, 30 combat shuttle wings, pilots standing by, 2,000 Delta Strike Team soldiers, the best warriors the United Nations had ever trained. "They are powering weapons," the censor officer said. "They are locking onto our fleet." Nodded. He had expected this. They would want to engage at range. They would use their superior firepower to try to destroy the human fleet before it could get close enough to matter. They would be wrong. "All ships, I want evasive patterns. Do not engage the dreadnoughts directly. Repeat, do not engage the dreadnoughts," ordered. "All shuttle wings, prepare for descent. You are going to the planet's surface. Your mission is to support the colony's defensive positions and rescue civilians where possible." The order was risky. Every military officer on the fleet knew it. Sending shuttles to the planet's surface while the controlled orbit meant some shuttles would not make it. Pilots would die. Soldiers would die. But that was the point. That was the only way to win. They fired first. Energy weapons lit up the space between the two fleets. The human ships were smaller and faster than the dreadnoughts. They moved in patterns the computers could not predict. Each time a weapon locked on, the human ship had already moved. The human destroyers returned fire. Their weapons were smaller than the ones, but they were fast and accurate. The first hit on a dreadnought came from the UNSC Archer. The explosion was small against the massive hull of the alien ship, but it was a hit. They were not invincible. In the shuttle bay of the UNSC Santiago, Major Robert Kelly was checking his equipment for the final time. His Delta Team 1 consisted of 40 soldiers, the best soldiers, the ones who had trained together for 3 years, the ones who trusted each other in ways that went beyond words. Kelly was 38 years old. He had been in the military since he was 18. He had served on Earth, on the Moon, on Mars, but he had never fought a real enemy before. None of them had. The United Nations had signed peace agreements with every spacefaring species except This would be humanity's first real war. "Time to move out," Kelly said to his team. The soldiers stood up. They were armed with plasma rifles, which were better than older weapons but still not as powerful as weapons. They wore armor that was lighter than armor but faster and more flexible. They carried grenades, explosives, and equipment for creating barriers and structures quickly. The shuttle doors opened. The pilots were already in their seats. The shuttle bay depressurized. The shuttles began to move toward the exit. Kelly felt the shuttle launch like a punch in his chest. The pilot was doing what all human pilots did, moving in patterns that made it hard for enemies to shoot them down. The shuttle twisted and turned as it climbed toward the upper atmosphere. Through the viewport, Kelly could see other shuttles in formation with them. 20 shuttles total, each one carrying 200 Delta Team soldiers. The interceptors came at them fast. The pilot of Kelly's shuttle did something that would have looked suicidal to anyone watching. He took the shuttle into a spin, then dropped the nose toward the planet, then pulled up at the last second. The maneuver exposed the shuttle to weapons fire from 3 angles, but it also meant that the targeting systems lost lock. 2 shuttles behind them were not so lucky. One took a hit that damaged its left wing, but the pilot did not eject. Instead, he fought the controls and managed to keep the shuttle moving toward the planet. The other shuttle took a direct hit to the engine section. It exploded in a flash of light and fire. Kelly had seen the second explosion. That was 40 soldiers dead. Good soldiers. Soldiers he might have known if he had served with them, but there was no time for grief. There was only the mission. The remaining 19 shuttles broke through the upper atmosphere. The heat of re-entry burned the shuttles' hulls. The pilots focused on getting their soldiers to the surface alive. Below them, the colony was burning. Fires lit up the dark. Smoke rose in dark columns. Kelly saw the landscape. Forests and mountains and open plains. Somewhere down there were 40,000 people who did not know that help had arrived. Somewhere down there were his enemies. The shuttles landed hard. The impact threw everyone forward slightly, but the soldiers were trained for it. The doors opened. The hot air of 7 rushed in. It smelled wrong, alien. Kelly was the first one out of his shuttle. His soldiers followed him. They spread out in a combat formation, weapons ready. Around them, other shuttles were landing. Other soldiers were disembarking. The ground forces were visible to the east. They were advancing toward a large structure that Kelly understood from the briefing was the colony's main bunker. They were moving in organized formations. They had armor. They had heavy weapons. They had numbers. But they did not know that human soldiers were now on the ground between them and the bunker. They did not know that humans were about to become a problem they could not solve with firepower alone. Kelly raised his rifle and spoke into the radio. "All Delta teams, this is Major Kelly. Combat stations. Do not let them reach the bunker. Repeat, do not let them through. For the colony, for Earth. Engage." The first shots fired. The battle had begun. In the bunker below, Lisa heard the sound of combat from above. New voices on the radio. Human voices. Military voices. The sounds of a real military force fighting against the... She looked at and saw hope in his eyes. They were no longer alone. They were no longer facing the end alone. Humanity had come to fight for them. Spoke quietly, "We might survive this." Lisa did not answer. She was too busy watching the tactical display as human and forces clashed on the surface of 7. She was watching her people fight. She was watching humanity prove itself. They did not expect to lose. Loss was not part of their experience. They had conquered 17 star systems without significant resistance. They had fought weaker species and crushed them, but they had never fought humans. Major Kelly's first tactical decision was not to fight the head-on. Instead, he used the terrain. The colony had been built in a valley between 2 ridges of high ground. The bunker was positioned at the lowest point. The ground forces were advancing down the valley. Kelly split his soldiers into 3 groups. One group took position on the eastern ridge. One group took position on the western ridge. One group, under his direct command, established a defensive line directly in front of the bunker. When the realized human soldiers were blocking their path, they did what they always did. They attacked with overwhelming force. 300 warriors charged down the valley in a coordinated assault. They were confident. They were armored. They outnumbered the humans 3-1. What they did not understand was that humans were not fighting to win. Humans were fighting to survive, and survival changes how you fight. Kelly's soldiers opened fire from 3 directions at once. The formation broke apart. Warriors fell, but more kept coming. They were tough. Their armor was good. Their weapons were powerful. Then Sergeant Torres did something that changed the battle. She was positioned on the eastern ridge with her squad of 10 soldiers. She saw that the formation was pushing toward the center. She ordered her squad to move south to flank the assault. Torres was 32 years old. She was smaller than most soldiers, but she was faster, smarter, more dangerous. She had been born in Mexico City and had joined the United Nations military because she wanted to see the stars. Now she was about to see them change. Her squad moved through the rocks and trees of the ridge. They did not see them until it was too late. Torres ordered her soldiers to concentrate their fire on the rear of the formation. They turned to face this new threat, which meant they were no longer pressing the main assault. An energy weapon hit Torres in the arm. The blast burned through her armor and into her flesh. She screamed, but she did not stop fighting. She switched her rifle to her other hand and continued firing. Her squad saw her do it and they fought harder. Their sergeant was hit but still fighting. They could do nothing less. The assault broke. They fell back to regroup. In the bunker, Lisa watched the battle unfold on the tactical display. The human soldiers were moving faster than any military force she had ever seen. They were thinking on their feet, adapting, changing tactics based on what they observed. An officer called for reinforcements from orbit, but the dreadnoughts were engaged with the human fleet. They could not send down more troops. The ground commander had to work with what he had. The second assault came from the north. 200 warriors attacked down a new valley. Kelly had anticipated this. He moved half his soldiers to meet this new threat. The battle was growing larger, more complex, more desperate. Captain Adrian was commanding a defensive position at the colony's eastern shield generator. This was the device that kept bombardment from the orbiting ships from destroying the bunker. It was critical. If it fell, everyone in the bunker would die. Was 41 years old. He had been a scientist before he became a soldier. He did not like violence, but he understood necessity. He understood that sometimes good people had to do hard things. They sent 40 warriors to destroy the shield generator. Had only 4 soldiers with him, Private Daniel, Private Lisa, and Corporal James. The 4 humans against 40 aliens. Impossible odds. Looked at his soldiers and saw fear, but he also saw determination. These were people who understood what they were fighting for. Behind them, less than 100 meters away, were children sleeping in the bunker. Families. Innocent people. Activated the radio. All units, this is Captain. We are being attacked at the eastern shield generator. We will hold. Do not send reinforcements. Repeat, do not send reinforcements. Hold your positions. Then he turned to his soldiers and said, "Let us go to work." The 4 humans took position behind barriers and began firing at the approaching. The aliens advanced steadily, taking casualties but continuing forward. Their armor was tough. Their weapons were heavy. Private was hit in the shoulder. She fell, but she got back up. Corporal was hit in the leg. He continued firing from a prone position. Private took shrapnel across his face, leaving blood running into his eyes, but he kept fighting. Himself was hit twice. Once in the chest, his armor absorbing most of the damage. Once in the leg, the pain sharp and immediate. But he stayed upright. He stayed in the fight. He was the leader. His soldiers were looking to him. He could not fall. The shield generator was starting to show damage. Weapons fire was hitting it. Knew they were running out of time. He reached into his ammunition pack and pulled out a thermal detonator. A powerful weapon. Powerful enough to destroy everything around him. "You fall back," said. "Sir, we cannot leave you," said. "That is an order," said. "Fall back and contact Major Kelly." The 3 soldiers hesitated, but they obeyed. They moved back toward the bunker entrance. Primed the thermal detonator and held it in his hand. He looked at the advancing and he knew what was about to happen. He was about to die. He accepted this. He had always known that service might cost him his life. He had accepted that cost. The detonator had a 3-second delay, waited for the to get close enough that the blast would take most of them with it. He counted down silently, 3, 2, 1. The explosion was massive. The shield generator remained intact. The assault was completely destroyed. 40 warriors died. Some were wounded. Some were simply vaporized. Was thrown backward by the explosion. His body landed hard on the ground. He was bleeding. His armor was cracked and burned, but he was alive. His soldiers had fallen back far enough that they were not caught in the main blast. Tors and her squad found first. They carried him back toward the bunker. He had done it. He had held the line. The shield generator remained online. As the sun set on 7, the battle had achieved a stalemate. They had failed to break through. The humans had failed to push them back, but the colony was still alive. The bunker was still defended. Kelly stood with a map and looked at his soldiers. They were tired, they were wounded, but they were still fighting. "Tomorrow they will try again," Kelly said to his officers. "Tomorrow they will bring everything they have, but we will be here. We will be ready. We will not let them through." His soldiers cheered, but the sound was hoarse. Exhausted, but the sound was there. The sound of human beings still fighting. still surviving, still hoping that tomorrow might bring salvation. While the ground forces were fighting below, a different kind of battle was happening above 7. General was facing 3 dreadnoughts with 5 human destroyers and 2 cruisers. On paper, it was a losing matchup. The dreadnoughts were larger, more heavily armed, more experienced, but had something they did not have. He had studied human history. He had learned from 1,000 years of human warfare, and he knew something crucial. Size and firepower did not always win battles. Strategy did. All ships maintain formation Delta 7, ordered. Keep moving, keep them guessing. The human fleet was moving in a pattern that looked random to an outside observer. But it was not random. Every movement was calculated. Every turn had a purpose, was forcing the dreadnoughts to split their targeting computers across multiple targets. This meant the dreadnoughts were shooting at moving targets with weapons that were built to hit stationary targets. "Sir, they are launching fighters," the sensor officer reported. "Let them come," said. "Tell the fighter wings to engage." Human combat shuttles broke away from the fleet. They moved in coordinated groups, using the planet itself as cover. The fighters were larger and more heavily armed, but the human pilots were more creative. They flew in patterns that they could not predict. They used the atmosphere to hide. They used the terrain to their advantage. Watch the tactical display. It was a beautiful thing to watch, not because it was pretty, but because it represented years of training and preparation coming together in a moment of extreme pressure. "Fire pattern Omega," said. "All ships fire on my mark." The human fleet opened fire with every weapon they had. The missiles were not as powerful as missiles, but there were many of them. They came from 5 different directions at once. The dreadnoughts tried to defend against the attack, but their weapons could not hit everything. The second dreadnought took a direct hit to its left power core. The explosion was visible from the planet's surface. The massive ship reeled from the impact. It was still fighting, but it was damaged. Its weapons became less accurate. Its shields flickered. "We are hurting them," the tactical officer said, surprise evident in her voice. Allowed himself a slight smile. "That is the point. That is always the point. Humans hurt things that hurt us. That is what we do." The first dreadnought changed tactics. It began accelerating toward the human fleet. The captain of the UNSC Santiago, captain, saw the dreadnought coming directly at her ship. Was 39 years old. She was the best captain in the human fleet. She had joined the military because her father had been a ship captain before her. It was in her blood. War was in her blood. The dreadnought was moving fast, closing the distance between itself and the Santiago. Knew what was about to happen. The dreadnought was going to try to ram her ship or get close enough for point-blank weapons fire. "All hands brace for impact," ordered. "Helm, bring us directly between the dreadnought and the planet." The tactical officer looked at her in shock. "Captain, if we position ourselves there, the dreadnought can bombard the planet through us." "That is the point," said. "If we are in the way, it cannot bombard anything. The dreadnought will have to get through us first." Made the decision that would change everything. She was putting her ship between the colony and destruction. She was betting her ship and her life, and the lives of her crew, that she could keep the enemy from reaching the people below. The UNSC Santiago moved directly between the dreadnought and 7. The massive alien ship tried to maneuver around her, but had positioned her vessel perfectly. The dreadnought could not get a clear shot at the planet without going through the human ship first. "Open fire," commanded. "All weapons, everything you have, make it hurt." The Santiago's weapons were smaller than the dreadnought's weapons, but they were accurate. The hits were constant. The dreadnought returned fire. Energy weapons lit up the space between the 2 ships. The Santiago's shields began to fail. "Shields at 50% and dropping," the engineer reported. The ship shook. A hit to the starboard engine. Another hit to the communications array. The Santiago was being torn apart, but it was holding position, kept her ship between the dreadnought and the planet. On the bridge, notice the structural integrity warning. The ship was failing. The hull was cracking in multiple places. The reactor was overheating. The Santiago did not have much time left. But it did not need much time. It only needed to hold long enough for the rest of the fleet to do their job. General had moved the other human ships into position. They were firing concentrated volleys at the third dreadnought, hit after hit. The massive ship was slowing down. Its weapons were becoming less accurate. "Fire the hammer missiles," ordered. "All of them. Do not hold anything back." The hammer missiles were the most powerful weapons humanity had ever built. They were experimental. They had never been fired in combat before, but they were about to be. 20 hammer missiles launched from the human fleet. They moved toward the third dreadnought in a coordinated formation. The dreadnought tried to shoot them down, but there were too many. The missiles reached their target and detonated. The explosion was visible across the entire system. The third dreadnought went dark. Its weapons stopped firing. Its engines stopped burning. The ship was dead. But the other two dreadnoughts were still fighting. The second one was damaged but still active. The first one was attacking the Santiago, and the Santiago was dying. Felt the explosions through the deck beneath her feet. The bridge shook. Sparks fell from the ceiling. Her crew was working frantically to keep the ship operational, but they were fighting a losing battle. "All hands abandon ship," ordered. "Captain, we are still in," the tactical officer began. "That is an order," said. "Abandon ship. Get to the escape pods. Move now." The crew ran for the escape pods, stayed on the bridge. She was the captain. The captain was the last to leave. But before she left, she did one final thing. She set the Santiago's remaining power on collision course with the dreadnought's bridge. The massive human ship accelerated directly toward the alien vessel. The dreadnought tried to move out of the way, but it was too slow. The Santiago's dying hull crashed into the dreadnought's bridge section. The explosion was massive. The dreadnought's bridge was destroyed. The ship's command structure collapsed. The dreadnought began to drift, its weapons silent. Made it to the last escape pod just before the ship completely disintegrated. She watched the UNSC Santiago die, taking a piece of the dreadnought with it. In orbit above 7, they had lost 3 battles, 3 ships destroyed or crippled. The remaining dreadnoughts began to retreat. They fired one final volley toward the planet, but the human fleet intercepted the attack. Below in the bunker, Lisa heard the radio transmission from General. The fleet was leaving. The bombardment had stopped. The colony had survived. Kelly received the order to push the ground forces into retreat. He gathered his soldiers and did what humans did. He advanced. He pushed forward. He gave them an impossible choice: fight a stronger enemy or retreat. They chose to retreat. They pulled back toward their landing zones and prepared to leave the planet. As dawn came to 7, they were gone. The colony was free. The humans had done the impossible. They had won. On the surface, Kelly and his soldiers stood looking up at the sky. The ships were leaving. The human fleet was in orbit, damaged but victorious. "We did it," Torres said, her arm bandaged and her face covered in soot. Kelly looked at his soldiers. They were tired. They were wounded. Some were dead, but they had survived. More than survived. They had won. "Yes," Kelly said. "We did." 3 weeks after the retreated, the colony was still digging out from the destruction. The fires had been put out. The bodies had been buried. The work of rebuilding had begun. But something had fundamentally changed in the galaxy. The news had spread. Every spacefaring species was talking about 7, the colony under siege, the dreadnoughts in orbit, the human fleet that came from nowhere, the human soldiers who held impossible positions, the human captain who crashed her own dying ship into an enemy warship's bridge. The message was clear across known space: do not underestimate humanity. General was promoted to Fleet Admiral. He was given command of a new division of the human military. The Delta Strike teams were expanded from 2,000 soldiers to 5,000. New ships were being built. New pilots were being trained. Humanity was no longer a curiosity. Humanity was a power. But did not think about military ranks or advancement. He thought about the soldiers who had died. 237 human warriors had given their lives on 7 and in orbit. 237 families back on Earth would receive notices. 237 empty chairs at dinner tables. He visited the medical facility where the wounded were being treated. Captain Adrian was there, his legs bandaged and his face marked with scars that would never completely fade. But he was alive. Most of the wounded were alive. Medicine had come a long way. Smiled when entered his room. "General, I did not expect to see you here." "I visit all the wounded," said. "It is my duty. How are you feeling?" "Like I was blown up by a thermal detonator," said, but he was still smiling. "Which I was, but the doctors say I will walk again. Not without a cane, but I will walk." Nodded. "The colony is calling you a hero. All of you, the soldiers, the pilots, captain, all of you." Shook his head. "We did our duty, that is all. We were sent to protect people and we protected them." But knew it was more than that. It was easy to do your duty when you were comfortable, when you were safe. It was harder to do your duty when you were facing death, when you were facing enemy soldiers who were stronger and more experienced than you, when you were facing a choice between living and sacrificing yourself for strangers. That was what humans did. They made the hard choice. Sergeant Torres was back on duty already. Her arm was still healing, but she was in the command center helping to coordinate the rebuilding efforts. She saw enter and stood to attention. "General," she said. "At ease," Sergeant said. "I came to thank you. You did excellent work on the battlefield." "Just doing my job, sir," Torres said. Had heard this response a dozen times from a dozen different soldiers, but it never made sense to him. No one had asked these soldiers to flank an assault force while wounded. No one had asked them to hold positions against impossible odds. They had done it because they chose to, because they understood that their choices mattered. Dr. Price had become the center of attention across the colony. Every news organization wanted to interview him. Every government wanted to understand what had happened. He gave careful answers to all of them, but the main point was always the same. Humans had come to help. Humans had sacrificed themselves for people they did not know. He was in his office, reviewing reports when Major Kelly knocked on the door. "Dr. Price, I wanted to check on how the colony is doing," Kelly said. Gestured for him to sit. "The people are strong. They have lost much, but they have not lost hope. That is because of you, because of your soldiers." Kelly shifted uncomfortably. "We did what any military would do. We protected civilians." But knew that was not true. He had studied military history from dozens of species. The military would have negotiated. They would have tried diplomacy. They themselves would have conquered and enslaved. But humans did something different. Humans threw themselves into the fire to save people they had never met. "There is something I want to show you," said. He led Kelly to the main observation window of the colony. Below them in the central plaza people were working. Humans and aliens together, building new structures, planting new gardens, teaching children about the attack and what it meant. "The youngest generation will grow up knowing that humans came for them," said. "Knowing that when they were in danger, a species from across the galaxy risked everything to help them. That knowledge will change them. It will change their understanding of what is possible. It will change them forever." A small girl ran past below, holding the hand of a human soldier. The soldier was Private, one of the men who had been wounded in the siege. He walked slowly, still healing, but he was helping a child explore the rebuilding colony. The girl was laughing. Kelly saw the scene and something changed in his expression. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition. "I did not do this for gratitude," Kelly said quietly. "We did it because those children needed help. That is all." placed a hand on the Major's shoulder. "I know, that is exactly why it matters so much." The message spread through the galaxy over weeks and months. A new power had emerged, not the most advanced, not the most experienced, but the most willing to sacrifice, the most willing to fight for principle, the most willing to die for strangers. They in their distant home systems began to question their tactics. A species had beaten them not through superior strength, but through superior will, through a willingness to do impossible things, through a choice to sacrifice themselves for innocent people. They had never encountered anything like that before. They did not know how to respond to it, so they simply stayed away from human space. They redirected their expansion efforts elsewhere. They did not want to face that kind of opponent again. But word of what humans could do had spread, and it changed everything. The engineers began requesting human military advisors. They asked for human cultural exchange officers. The neutral worlds that had been uncertain about humanity now understood humans were worth knowing, worth trusting, worth learning from. Captain had survived the loss of the UNSC Santiago. She was recovering from severe burns and radiation exposure, but she would live. The human military wanted to honor her sacrifice by naming a new ship after her lost vessel. But first, there would be a ceremony. On the day of the ceremony stood in front of the galaxy's assembled governments. Her uniform was pressed. Her scars were visible. She was not ashamed of them. They were the marks of her sacrifice. A representative spoke to her before the ceremony began. It was unusual. They did not usually communicate with other species after defeats, but this one approached anyway. "Why?" they asked. "Why did you crash your ship? You could have survived, you could have run. Why did you choose death?" Looked at the alien and gave the only answer she had. Because there were people on the planet who could not run. There were children who could not fight. Someone had to stand between them and death. That is what we do. They did not respond, but something in its posture changed. A slight shift, a moment of understanding perhaps. 6 months after the siege ended, the colony celebrated a festival. The people who had nearly died were alive. The children who had hidden in bunkers were running in the sunlight. The soldiers who had fought were healing. Lisa Hayes had been promoted to admiral. She was now the military commander of 7 and 3 surrounding colonies. But today, she was simply standing with General, looking out over the festival. "We did something," said quietly. "We won a battle," Lisa said. "No," said. "We did something bigger than that. We showed the galaxy that humans matter, that our choices matter, that when we decide to fight for what is right, we fight until we win, or until we die, but we do not stop." Lisa nodded. She understood. The battle at 7 was just the beginning. It was the first time humans had proven themselves in a galactic war, but it would not be the last. As the sun set over 7, lights began to illuminate across the colony. Lights from homes that had been rebuilt. Lights from markets where people traded goods. Lights from schools where children learned. Lights from hospitals where the wounded healed. The message had gone out across the galaxy. Humanity was here. Humanity would fight. Humanity would sacrifice. Humanity would protect the innocent. And nothing would ever be the same. In the children's section of the festival, a young girl approached Private, who was watching the celebration from a bench. "Did you really fight the aliens?" the girl asked. Looked at the child and smiled. "Yes, we did." "Were you scared?" she asked. Thought about it, about the fear, about the uncertainty, about the pain, but also about the choice to stand between danger and innocence. "Yes," said, "but we did it anyway, because that is what humans do. We do scary things when people need us." The girl nodded and ran off to play with other children. Watched her go and knew that his sacrifice had meant something, not because he was a hero, but because the child understood now. She understood that good people could do impossible things, that humans could change the galaxy. And from that understanding, great things would come.